Greetings! My name is George Falconer, and this is Peniel. And I'm going to start again the Hosea studies, and I'll be looking at chapter 11. However, may I first of all recommend to you An Unbelievable Inheritance by Peter Bevington. I was a member of Operation Mobilisation for many years, and the British headquarters is on the site called the Quinta by Weston Wren in North Shropshire. Peter was the manager when I joined. He was the manager of the Quinta Hall Conference Centre, and Operation Mobilisation is on the same site. And Peter has written a history of the site, and it is indeed an inheritance from God. God has gifted the Quinta site for Christian work, and many of the guests have come there and been blessed there. Operation Mobilisation is certainly blessed there, and you can get this book. I would imagine that Peter's probably still selling it, but anyway, you can go online and look for the book, and you will find that this is a very interesting book about the history of the site, even going back many years before it was in its present state. It was still used for Christian work. Charles Price bought it, or the McVitie family, and set it up for Christian work, and it's still mightily blessed. And I can see that some of the guest groups at Quinta Hall are now posting videos on YouTube and talking about how blessed they are by being there. God is pouring out to them and changing them in all sorts of ways. And as I say, Operation Mobilisation is there. For me, I went there, joined OM, and on that first day when I arrived, I thought, that long road, what have I done? But it became home. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. It had ups and downs like everybody else, but it was still the place God wanted me to be. And perhaps if your group is looking for a place to have a meeting, to have a conference, then you might consider the Quinta. But anyway, get this book, An Unbelievable Inheritance by Peter Bevington. Now, continuing, Hosea. Remember, the background is God has done an unusual thing. He has told Hosea to marry Gomer, a prostitute, because he wants this prophet to live out in front of Israel God's own experience, his own view of how Israel has prostituted themselves with other gods. And God is calling them back and warning them because they're serving false gods. We should bear in mind, do we serve false gods? I think that we often serve the god of self, and we are selfish, and we need to be aware of that and be cautious and ask ourselves, are we wholehearted? Do we truly love the Lord? Have we actually got saved at all? And if you have been saved, are you deviating away from the path that God has for you? And if you are, you need to correct it. And we should bear in mind that Hosea, although it's history now, it still applies. It applies to individuals, it applies to nations, and it can apply in all sorts of ways if you listen to the Lord. Anyway, chapter 11. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So they called them, so they went from them, and they sacrificed unto Balaam and burned incense to graven images. I taught Ephraim also to go, taking them by their arms, but they knew not that I healed them. I drew them with cords of man, with bands of love. And I was to them as they take off the yoke on their jaws, and I laid meat unto them. He shall not return to the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refuse to return. And the sword shall abide on his cities, and shall consume his branches, and devour them, because of their own counsels. And my people are bent to backsliding from me, though they are called them to the Most High, none at all would exalt him. Imagine that, not one single one. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? What shall I make thee as Adam? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? Mine heart is turned within me, my repentings are kindled together. I will not execute my fierceness of mine anger. I will not return to destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not a man, the Holy One in the midst of thee, and I will not enter into the city. They shall walk after the Lord. He shall roar like a lion. When he shall roar, then the children shall tremble from the west. They shall tremble as a bird out of Egypt, and as a dove out of the land of Assyria. And I will place them in their houses, saith the Lord. Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah yet ruleth with God, and is faithful with the saints. So Judah was the southern kingdom, because the kingdom had been split. And Israel, or Ephraim as it was called, was the northern part. The northern part consisting of two tribes, and Judah, the southern part, consisting of two. And those of you who are parents will understand the opening. When Israel was a child, I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. As they called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed unto Balaam and burned incense to graven images. Now, children are vulnerable. They are dependent on their parents. And as a fledgling nation in Egypt at the time, because remember, Israel had all to go to Egypt. Jacob and all his family lived in Egypt, and down through the generations they grew and grew and grew as a family, as a nation, as a people group within Egypt. And there came a point where God called Moses and told you, I want you to lead my people back to the promised land, to the land of promise. And that was difficult. They were disobedient, and they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years until God allowed them to come in. But as God nurtured them, and they didn't seem to realize that God was looking after them, encouraging them. And when they left the land and again were in their own land, they were surrounded by other nations who worshipped the Baals and sacrificed to them in all sorts of ungodly ways and turned their back upon the true Lord. And we have to be aware of that, because there are antichrists, there are people who will seek to turn us away from the Lord. And this passage where it says that when Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. Called my son out of Egypt. And we find that in Matthew 2 and 15, that is quoted. The Old Testament prophecies give us proof that Jesus is who he said he was, because Herod the king sought to kill Jesus as a baby. He thought this Messiah, this King of Kings, would take his place, and he didn't want that. How wrong he was about what sort of king it was. But anyway, Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt, and they stayed there until the death of Herod. And it says here in Matthew chapter 15, bear in mind what we've just read in Hosea, calling him out of Egypt, calling my son out of Egypt. It says here, and was there until the death of I'll start from verse 14. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. That's Joseph, of course. And was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. So what Joseph did to protect Jesus as a baby was prophesied by Hosea. And there's a number of other things that are prophesied by Hosea, and indeed all the prophets that are quoted in the New Testament as proof of fulfillment of these prophecies. These Old Testament prophets had to get it 100% right, and they were inspired by God to speak and write the things they did. And Hosea was no exception to that. And he was the one who prophesied that Jesus would come out of Egypt. I would imagine that some people probably thought, how on earth is that going to happen? He's going to be Jewish and born in Israel. Well, he was. He was born in Israel. But he had to go into exile in Egypt until Herod was gone and the threat was gone. And then God the Father brought the family out of Egypt. It's amazing how prophecy is fulfilled. And here they are, as a nation, being disloyal to God, the very God who had created them as a nation, who loved them, and who had given them everything. And they were burning incense to the god of Baal, and they were worshipping idols. Now, an idol, I don't know about you, but an idol is made of wood or stone. It doesn't speak, it's not alive, it can't do anything. And yet they called that God. How foolish can you be? But we do the same thing. It's just that our idols are not necessarily made of wood or stone. Sometimes our idol is a person we see in the mirror. Or we have all sorts of superstitions or anything to avoid God. I happen to believe that believing the theory of evolution is a way of putting off God. Because if he's created you, you owe him everything. False gods are much more subtle now. But anyway, it says then, I drew them with cords of a man with bands of love, and I was to them as they take off the yoke of their jaw, and I laid meat unto them. He saw to them that they were fed. And he taught them. He drew them with cords like a father draws his child, draws them on. And they kept on refusing to return to the Lord. They kept on worshipping their false gods. Rather like us. I see the state of the nation now. I see the state of the Western world. And I could never have imagined how ungodly we could be. But you know what? It's there in front of us now, every single day. You've only got to look at the news or the things that go on around you to see we have become ungodly. And we as Christians have to be faithful to God and continue to minister before him and to continue to preach the gospel and be faithful to God in all circumstances, no matter what is going on. And Hosea had to do that. Hosea had to do that with his wife. Hosea had to do that in his prophecies before the nation and record them, wrote them down. And it says that my people are bent to backsliding from me, though they called them to the Most High, and none would exalt them. And he's also said that the sword shall abide on the cities. He's saying that there'll be warfare in the cities. Bear in mind that Israel was seeking peace with Egypt and Assyria, and they thought, we've got allies, we are trusting in our allies rather than God, and they'll keep the peace. But God is telling them Assyria will take you over, because the king of Assyria will rule over you. You think you're getting peace, but the fact is you're going to be oppressed by Assyria, and the king of Assyria will rule over you. And that's my will, that's my allowing it, because I am using it to draw you back to me, to worship God, to worship the only true God. Sometimes in our lives, God allows circumstances to happen to us to get our attention, to draw us back to Him, not just as individuals, but whole nations, whole people groups. God uses circumstances to draw us to Himself, even terrible things, to get our attention and make us repent. Repent is a changing of your mind, a turning around. It's not just feeling sorry, it's taking action and putting off sin and worshipping the true God. And he mentions these two places. It says, how shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Adamah? And how shall I set thee as Zebonim? Now, these were two cities that were destroyed by God when He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for their gross sin. And Hosea is reminding them about this. And he's really saying, I destroyed them, but I'm not going to destroy you. I am going to discipline you, though. But he's reminding them of the past, about God's dealing with people who fought against Him. And he's really saying, you are hard-necked, you're bent on not worshipping me, who created you and gave you everything. Because it says, I will not execute the fierceness of my anger. I will not return to destroy Ephraim. That's Israel, of course. For I am God and not man. And it's really saying, you as men with your sinful hearts, you destroy. You get angry about those who sin against you, and you destroy. Even just thinking it is bad. If you wish someone dead, it's as good as killing them. But I am not man. I'm not like you, is what God is saying. I am restrained. I am merciful. And in my mercy, I will discipline you with this invader who's going to take you over. And so you will then cry out to me and return to me. God was using that discipline. And it says this, and this is another prophecy, they shall walk after the Lord. He shall roar like a lion, whom he shall roar. Then the children shall tremble from the west. They shall tremble as a bird out of Egypt. Now, of course, remember, Christ comes out of Egypt. He's going to draw them out from Egypt. And a lion roars. And we tremble. This is as a bird. A bird is gentle and tweets. And he's saying, you'll tremble like the bird. And as a dove out of the land of Assyria, I will place them in their houses, saith the Lord. He's saying, I will draw my punishment to an end at the appropriate time and restore you. But until then, I'm disciplining you. Perhaps you're going through difficult times. Maybe God is using it to discipline you, or maybe He's using it to train you. But one way or another, the Lord loves those who truly belong to Him. Notice I said truly, because it's not just head knowledge. Maybe you acknowledged God once and stuck your hand up at a meeting once and said, I accept Jesus Christ, and then didn't do anything about it. If that's the case, you're fooling yourself. God draws His people. It's heart changing. It's a change of life to be a Christian. And God is saying, my punishment will draw to an end when I've decided that you have repented. As Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. So Ephraim, Israel, is deceitful and lies. But at this point, when he's saying this, Judah is still faithful to the Lord. Judah had some good kings who drew them back to the Lord when they would depart at times, like Israel, but they sometimes had kings who would lead them back. Israel was so hard-hearted, they didn't have any kings that drew them back. Is God drawing you back? Is He drawing me back? We are watched by God. God is present right now with me, and He's present with you. He watches everything you do. He knows everything you think. And your choice is this. You're either with God or you are against God, and there's no neutral ground. Which ground are you on? And if you have departed from the Lord, go back to Him. And next time we will read chapter 12.